If you have a strategy, don't just put it on the intranet and pray for it to come to life. Very welcome to our session. It's all about flight levels and how to bring strategy into action.
I'm Henriette. I am from the Elephant in the Room. I live in Berlin and I'm a flight level coach. I work as an RTE at the moment as well, STEMI coach, Scrum Kanban of course as well.
I'm Kerstin Lerner. I'm from Deutsche Telekom. I'm a team member from the Mayflower team and we are standing for flight levels and bringing business agility into our company. Let's start what actually is the problem we are concerned here about. Imagine there is this group of people who basically are the ones to decide on which topics to work on, projects to approve and deciding what is important and what not. And then people come to that group, might be an investment committee, something like that, and they pitch their ideas and they think, wow, sounds great, let's do it. And then you have a lot of ideas on the idea pool. And the next day, somebody else comes and asks and pitches, and they get excited about it, what opportunity this brings for the company, for the future, and they also approve it and fund it. And so you have a lot of ideas and initiatives on your way. And on the other hand, you have the people doing the actual work, like your teams, the delivery teams. It's always the same people. And they are already quite busy with business as usual and the existing projects, and they don't know how to deal with additional strategy, how to bring flow into that strategy. You don't want it to last like 3 years until you see some effect, some impact of your strategy.
So you heard bringing strategy into action. What's the problem about it? You heard already some keywords which are connected to creating strategies and having strategies. And I want to look at the key ingredients for a good strategy. So it's, of course, very important that you have those key ingredients. So if you want to have a strategy, of course, you need to have a vision. You need to look into the future. What's coming next? What might be important? You want to describe your vision to see what you're working towards too. And to break it down, you, of course, to see how you can work towards that vision, you need to set goals. Or you might also call them objectives. And even more, if you set them, of course, you will have a list. You saw there's a big, huge idea pool. So it's a good idea to have a prioritization on that. So having it like numbered 1 to 10 or so, know what's coming first, what's coming later. Also, this is just a prioritization. Setting a focus might be even a stronger prioritization by saying we always work only maybe on a limited item number or so, focusing on something or saying like this is the most important batch at the moment and we work on this. So focus is something which brings your strategy also to have some impact by not doing what you saw on this picture just before, having a very long list and not knowing to work on what first. Also, values, of course. Why are values important? Because they are sort of the basis for everything to give a direction, to decide on what is the vision about, how do we want to have goals and focus on something. So it has to be woven into your strategy, the values. Well, having all of this is very important and it's a good step, but of course somehow you need to break it down as well. So because if you do the strategy setup, somehow having a workshop maybe or so, not everyone is maybe included at the one side, and on the other side people need to work on it and you have to somehow break it into smaller chunks, having it discussed and decided on the meta perspective first of all. And once you had it broken down into smaller chunks, also what you want to do is you want to somehow be able to check it to see how much is implemented of that already, and also to measure your outcomes which you want to achieve by setting the strategies, right? So this is all a very good part, all a very important part. But as you know, our talk today, our session here is about how to bring it really into action. Those is something which might be a situation which, you know, people say like, okay, yeah, let's post it on the internet so everyone knows about it. Okay, this is basically not really how you bring it into action. There's another situation which is about the strategic goal setting again, saying like, we will have strategy meetings every year, maybe together with the whole company even. And then you see two people after that, this is done. And you see this picture says like, let's do this, 22 vision, goals, values, everything is talked about and, aligned on. And then the one person says, yeah, this year's retreat was really great again. So much fun with all those people. And then the other one answers, yeah, but how to bring all the vision, goals, and value really into action? I mean, I keep forgetting it in my daily business, right? The next idea, you see the year as a road the runner is running. It's a whole year. It starts with like the start, Happy New Year. You look for the next hurdle, which is strategy workshop. So that's where it's set. And then you're like, okay, we need to somehow communicate it and bring it into action. This is a little bit later already. And we are into the year, and you have then a small time span where it can be implemented. You have the end of the year, and only after the end of the year, you have this last flag saying, measure success of the strategy. Coming to that point, you see the astonished emoji with a sweat at the face and saying like, okay, strategy. Oh, with all the daily business, it was so hard to implement the strategy on top of that. Let's just map the bow, so the business as usual, to it and guess somehow the success. We see this currently with our customers everywhere, that you have like the PAD planning, the operational planning for the year. And in the end, you have documentation on how you really implemented the strategy by what you did, or maybe did anyway. So, but how can we bring it into action? What do we have now once we have the vision and goals, the prioritization, the focus, the values woven into it, and everything which is helping to support this? You are having something you decide on in one specific point of time. Even if you do it iteratively, it's still something you should decide on, that it's not yet a process. So what we need to do is to bring it from that time in point in time into something which is a flow of time, so into a flow. So from having that set the focus, we want to bring it into flow. What is the problem about that? So usually we have this vision, which has a time span which is infinite. And then at the second step, we look for a strategy where we look for maybe, for example, 3 to 5 years time span. And then we will have usually a time gap. And that makes it so hard to bring the strategy into action, to bring it down from a meta perspective into something which really can work on, which we can really implement, which will have an impact, and doing it forward mapping and not backward mapping, sort of. And this is how we close the time gap between the strategy with the 3 to 5 years, bring it down, the time gap, to the epics, which we can see. It could be a different name in your companies as well, but usually most of you know the names of epics, and then break it down into smallest chunks of tasks, which we work on usually like 1 to 4 weeks, for example, with Scrum, or even a little bit longer, up to 8 weeks maybe. So what we add here is now we will have also yearly and quarterly outcomes, which we add in between this, closing the time gap. Also, this maybe from objective and key results already, that we look for the molds and that we like to connect this objectives, which are like North Stars and meta perspectives, and to look for what are key results which we will see once we implemented the strategy, and how can we measure that. This is wonderful. This is a good step. And now what we do is, by breaking it down, as we said, from a meta perspective by time, 3 to 5 years, adding the yearly and quarterly steps, we can bring it down now to even smaller steps, and add real actions, and add them already connected to the strategy level. So describe the work required to drive progress on the key results. So even one step further. So what does it basically do? What is the difference? It's closing the time funnel, as I said. So you will have a funnel which brings down your strategic focus topics down to a focus. And if we turn this now, you can realize that we have like a start of a process. So this becomes the funnel for the next steps, starting the flow into those steps that have to be done to deliver the value we are aiming at with our goals. So this is the first step of bringing the focus and bring something in one point of time into the flow, bring it into action.
It might seem complicated, but it's not at all. It's really easy, and we want to keep it easy and simple. And what the flight levels model helps us with is that they say, okay, on each level you have 5 activities you do. And since strategy is also one level, flight level 3, you also do these 5 activities on that level. So first you start with visualizing the situation, and it is really easily done. So we know we start with strategy. So we start with the focus topics, and then we break it down into smaller chunks, time-wise and scope-wise. What outcomes could that be? So something that really contributes that we achieve our strategic focus topic, and we make that measurable. And then we even break it down into actions, something really specific we want to do, some work package we can work on. And then we also map that, as you know, build a board out of it. So really a strategic portfolio board, and then you know what contributes to which. So action number 1 also contributes to your outcome, and you see where it stands. You can track it, you can talk about it. Still, you remember the problem that that there was too many pitches for that board members, and they all went for it. So the next step, as flight levels helps us with, is create focus. How do we create focus? Remember how Henriette said that we need to close the time gap, and that we can do focus via time too. We say strategic topics are 3 to 5 years, measurable outcomes like maybe 1 year, and then we have these actions. And maybe that's too long, like the time gap too big, and then we might add quarterly measurable outcomes, typical objective and key results, and we close the time gap and really want to break down our work into achievable parts, break it down into specific actions we do. And then having that board and that focus, because we kind of limit the work we do time-wise, we also need to go for agile interactions. So really think about who's needed to make decisions on that board. Because just to have a board is of no value at all, because the intelligence stands in front of the board. So it's the people really taking that board as a means for communication and have discussions about it, track work in process, and also make decisions on it. And the next step in the thinking model of flight levels is also that we always want to measure progress. And the last step also is to operate and improve what we build here. And this, coming to our flight level 3, the strategic work, our strategic portfolio this is basically really, really important. And this is a big difference also between, strategy and other work, is that we need to close that feedback loop. Once actions are done, checkpoint, we are done with it, we need to talk about if these actions really contribute to achieving what we wanted to achieve. So do we really come closer to our desired outcome, and really do our measures improve? Nevertheless, what you should never do is like announce a strategy and end of year, look if you have achieved it. You need to talk about it, and you need to close that feedback loop. That basically brings us to something that on a flight level 3, it might not end with a done column, but a measure success. So you really need to go into that conversation if you achieved something by doing that actions. You have your strategic topics. It's a status quo view. And then you go and evolve and you learn, and you need to include that learning in your next strategy cycle, for example, or in your next objective and key results cycle. So on a flight level 3 board, you would never just pull the next strategic item that's on the list. You always think about if it still makes sense, because your environment changes and you need to talk about what would be next to do then.
Once we did all this, so you saw what needs to be ingredients to the strategy, what are problems, you saw how you can put it into the flow and how you can add those 5 activities to make it work and to close the feedback loop, to make it possible to operate and improve on your system, and to bring those strategies into creating value, into having an impact. But how do we really do this? How do we really connect strategy operation on all levels? So how do we do this with flight levels? So what is flight levels? Flight levels can help you find out where in an organization you have to do what in order to achieve the results that you want to achieve. Strategic results, for example. And what flight level is coming with is 5 activities. You heard about them already. And then also with 3 levels. You can see here, obviously, 3 different levels. What you see here is not an org chart. It's not about having, for example, a Scrum team, and the Scrum team is meeting on a higher level and it's just putting all the same methods, but again and again in bigger chunks. This is not what it's about. It's not about a classical org chart. What it is about instead is that you see different levels having a different perspective, which you have to look at. Everyone has to look at this in every company, small or big, or even if you like freelancing, you need to have to take the 3 perspectives sort of as well. So as we said on the flight level 3, which is the top level of them, it's about strategy. It's about setting the focus to decide on which is most important, what is the right thing, the most important thing, what we should work on now. Then the second level, it's about how do we coordinate. So it's about coordination, the end-to-end coordination, all this work which has to be done. Of course, the chunks are bigger at that by time span and by the scope of the items you work on. And this is the part where you have the value stream, where you create the value. So there's the stream where your items flow through and where it's coordinated. And then you see on the bottom, the level 1 flight level, it's about the operational part. So this means you see really teams working on what has to be delivered. For example, developing something, making code, writing the concept for something, architectural, whatever the work is which the teams have to do at that level. And this is about delivery. And if you have a strategy set up on the top level, you want to see how this flows through the whole system, one to the next. And this is what you see by the arrows, of course. There are specific techniques for that, but this is on another talk then maybe. And so what we saw is we closed the time funnel at the one hand to see how we bring the strategy into action via closing it by time and making it possible to even map it to like 1 to 4 weeks or so it could be worked on. And what you see here is that we also connected in on the 3 levels, on all 3 levels. And this is done by connecting it via having this vision, the strategy, the yearly outcomes, the quarterly outcomes. And this is very interesting because we connect sort of a time span now with a scope span, and sort of we connect it, and by this trick we sort of bring it into one flow through the whole system by adding now at the flight level 3 level already initiatives, or you might call it differently in your company, the biggest chunk sort of which you will work on at a bigger time span as well as you would do it in a flight level 1. Bring it down via the coordination level. So you see the flight level 2 in red, initiatives and then epics. And that again is connected to the flight level 1, where you have the epics and the stories connecting to each other and breaking it down again into time spans from 1 to maximum 8 weeks and into smaller chunks, work items which you work on. So this is how it's done, how the strategy in the end is trickling down from the meta perspective into something, into action, into impact, down to the operation part, based on sort of a operational system, the flight levels.
We have a summary for you. The key message we want to bring to you here is there are kind of anti-patterns or some traps, and you should avoid. So if you have a strategy, don't just put it on the intranet and pray for it to come to life. This is something you should avoid. And also the backward mapping you should avoid. So not really having the strategy at the beginning of the year, then forget about it. And end of year, panic. Let's map what we did towards the strategy and then we are fine. Instead, what you should do is really like being clear on the vision, something you want to see your organization, your company, your business in the future, something ambitious, and also your goals. So what you want to achieve, your value, what makes you unique as a company, and the prioritizing. And you all twist it together. You come up with your strategic focus topic. So the message here is really develop your strategy out of these key ingredients. Focus on a certain topic, meaning that you decide for a direction you want to go and you want to actively work on that this really happens in the future. And this also means that you say no to something you don't want to do. And then you really bring it into action by bringing it into a board, into a strategic portfolio, breaking it down into smaller chunks, time-wise and scope-wise, and then also measure success. So really closing your feedback loop. What you learn, you incorporate into the next cycle, into your decision-making. So really questioning yourself, these actions, what we thought of, what are kind of experiments, did they really have an impact on our business or not? So this is the flight level 3. It's all about strategy. And of course, this flight level 3 is connected to flight level 2, the end-to-end coordination, where people coordinate what to do, who needs to do what in order to create a flow of work. So from idea to cash for a company, it's all about value. And then, of course, you have your flight level 1, the teams doing the actual work, conducting interviews, customer interviews, writing code. And this is all connected. And this picture, this thinking model gives you structure to your operational structure in your company. So work is flowing through your company and you have an idea where to start if you want to change something, if you have a certain challenge, something you want to achieve. And we also have these 5 activities on all 3 levels. So visualize the situation, bring work in order to create focus, to have agile interactions, and then you measure progress, see if you come closer to what you want to achieve, and you improve. And then you start again. And that is basically what flight levels and also bringing strategy into action is. Let's go into discussion. So what's remarkably for you, or what questions do you have?
Thank you very much for the visualization, how it comes from the top till the bottom and how they are all connected with each other, and making it again clear that it has to be all connected, otherwise it's not working. It makes for me again clear that flight levels and OKRs are a perfect match, how they can work together and how OKRs can fill this gap in the strategy level between the vision. On the other hand, I'm still worried about the strategy level because it's somehow too loaded. It's creating a strategy, deciding on strategy is not easy. And so I'm still wondering what helps the strategy level to have the right conversations about what needs to be done, what's actually a strategy. It's not just a list of what we want to do, but it's something different. And so this is still a playground where I'm still playing and exploring what works well, what not. I would like to hear also your experience on that. What your insights are in the strategy level, especially maybe once a year, or I don't know how frequently these kind of meetings are taking place or workshops are taking place where the strategy will be discussed. So I'm really curious about what your insights are there.
First of all, I want to say that in the environment of what you've just heard, there's a lot of approaches which help us as well to especially help specific levels to look for what they need to do their work, or at the level to do the work which you need to do at that level. For example, from a life, as you said, you would like to hear maybe something from other customers. So what would be something which we do with those people who are working on strategy? And again, I would say it's not necessarily the CEOs or anyone, so like this in that level, but it is those people who are somehow, by the work they do, working on strategy, right? So it could be someone even in an operational team, writing, for example, concepts or so. They are strongly connected maybe with the strategy, or it has a strong impact on them in both directions, I guess, and therefore they would work with that as well. So to take away, first of all, this is just C-level work. That's not about it. It's about anyone who needs to work on strategy has to do this work, right? How to set the strategy and how to break it down. by time and scope.
Then to add, so that could be a corporate company like Deutsche Telekom, huge company, but this could also be a freelance person, so who needs to cover all three. So really being business with doing business, the actual work, but also thinking about the future and doing strategy work. So it's a perspective you do. You can do that, by yourself or three people, 3-person team or company.
And then secondly, it's about that what you said, it's loaded. I mean, the picture with all the options and ideas, this is what we see, which is not a good example, right? So we have to learn, and by adding the strategy into the flow as a funnel to the whole end-to-end coordination process, right? It becomes clear that we should limit what we add into the system, or should think about really what we want to put into the system to make the system work on it, because it's a lot of resources who goes on working on this strategic item. Therefore, to look for that, of course, there's a lot of coaching around the strategy, people working on the strategy maybe. So it's about, first of all, what is our role as a company? What is the vision? And that sometimes is not clear already, right? Because maybe, for example, in my momentarily in my work, we thought we could talk with the company lead. They do the strategy and some mid-management people, and that's fine. And finding out by looking at the work system topology, which is an inherent part of working with flight levels, we found out they get a lot of work and strategy from someone else. So a mother sort of company, it's more movement, but still that one is deciding on the strategy more or less importantly as well. Not only, but very importantly. So this is what we found out by looking at the work system. So we did not look at anything like what do you want to do at all. We just looked at the work system topology, and that's why we found out, okay, strategy is not just set by you. So how do we cope with that? And then this is something which you do. So look for where is strategy really set, right? Is it just them, or is there somewhere else influencing it? Does something else come into the system? Where does the flow start? And then, of course, there's a lot of coaching looking for what do you want? What is the difference? What does this strategy or that strategy make a difference? By flight levels, you can even simulate this and look for, or by the work system topology, look for what would happen with that. And bit by bit. And then make the people working on strategy understand that their work has a very direct impact on the lead time, how fast something gets through the system, and how fast a company can adjust to any new law or any new thing coming up, right? Technology or so, right? If you stuff your system with a lot of things, you will have a long time until you can adjust something or so. So this is, of course, something, it's a lot on strategy level, but it's same on the other levels. There's a lot to do on that levels as well.
And I would like to add, you asked for how often you meet and talking about strategy. So I have one example where the strategy review, so like the looking back, closing the feedback loop, was done after 3 months. And then they found out, well, that's way too late, too long, and nothing happened. And now they say we include that in our stand-up. So whenever something gets done, once a week, and once a week they say and think, okay, what we have achieved last week, well, how does it contribute to strategy? So they really adjusted it. And if you ask for the meeting structures according to that, then there are several types of meetings, HR interactions, like the short sync, like the stand-up, should happen really frequently. And then when you plan for new strategy work, like the planning or the review, this is rather like not so frequent you would do. But nevertheless, there is some, you need to find out for yourself how often you need to meet and discuss on that. Also depending how dynamic your environment is, how much change there is, how often you need to adapt and really shift or turn or pivot whatsoever. But nevertheless, you should keep your meetings short, but often and short. That's basically the rule of.
Just a remark to what you just said. So I'm currently on a C level, and what I've just been through is a kind of this process with the flight levels, and I think there's a lot of danger in this, how you do it, and you need to be very careful to do not do something like a cargo cult. Always consider where you are and what you and who is within the process, because at the end of the day, when you do a strategy, you think about you want to change something, you want to change the environment, you want to put it to a better place, and you must be very careful to do not lose by entering or adding a new framework or a new methodology to lose the actors. So they might fill in all the things, and they put in the midterm goals, and they set up a plan. But it's very, very important that they understand why they're doing it. Otherwise, they just keep on doing whatever they've done and just filling every week a formula where they fill in all the data that they need to provide. And they're pissed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
totally agree.
Very, very careful. So always link the business goals with the changing goals, strategic goals.
Yeah, maybe one question from your experience. What does it take to introduce this concept or this idea of flight levels into an organization of, let's say, around about 1,000 people? Because if I can imagine looking at the 3 levels that you easily get lost in details with too many information, and then you basically like Gregor just said, you're just exercising something without value.
Well, it depends on what you want to achieve with that, what you want to do, right? So again, with that example, they see a new type of product and they don't have a process for that, and they want to set a different strategy for the company. And so where we start working with is at the moment with the strategic level, because that's where the biggest pain point is at the moment. Of course, by that, we look at the work system topology, and that gives us also orientation, right? It's a map. Maps always give you somehow orientation. And with that, you can then iteratively, of course, step by step, look what's the next most important thing to do in the change management, which you want to do. But the good thing about it is that with the flight levels, you can manage your change by evolution with the flight levels. So it's connected, it's woven into the structures itself. It's not just something which is at the site, right? So for example, you build your boards in what you want to achieve. If you want to see that coordination and strategy is working more closely together, that you bring it on one board, for example, because if we see it every day on one board, it's doing some with our thinking, right? For example. And then like this, you try, of course, to not get lost. It is different if you work like from the teams up, because you're in the more details, and then it's harder sometimes to get out of the teams and to really like connect everything. And but most of the times we do it at the same time. So we start something with the most pain point, but at the same time we work also with a team maybe, and then synchronous and asynchronous, so that they can work towards each other.
So you rather pick a slice from the organization from top to bottom, and then grow from there as needed.
For example,
you start with a certain challenge you have, or a problem, something that's really bothering you. And our problem, which we stated here, was strategy exists, but there's no execution. We cannot bring that into action. People just work as they do always, but not on strategy. And that was the problem we sketched here. And then flight levels gives you a thinking model where a kind of perspective towards your working system. So you see where you could do something to in order to successfully overcome the challenge. And our solution here was the flight level 3 strategy portfolio. Could be a different entrance too. So it's not a framework. It's nothing that you say you need to do these levels and then you're fine and all your problems are solved. Not at all. It's really customized, individual, and flexible.
And you can work on with any framework that you want to at the same time. You can do Safe, Scrum, Kanban, whatever. It's something which is supporting this, or OKRs, which works very well. It's supporting it.